Hello, this is Ciprian Borodescu, CEO at MorphL, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to our third webinar, Forming Agile AI/ML Teams or Tailoring Scrum for AI/ML Teams. For those of you who don't know, MorphL is a platform that uses AI to predict user behaviors in digital products and services, and we do that with the end goal of increasing product metrics and business KPIs. Today, I'm here with Edward Budaku, founder and agile consultant at Developers. Edward, I'm super excited to have you on our webinar series. Thank you so much for being here.
Hello, Ciprian. Thank you very much for inviting me and for opening this topic for the MorphL community. I'm really enthusiastic to contribute with our expertise and to figure out ways on how to improve teams' experience while delivering machine learning and artificial intelligence products. Just a bit about myself. I have a background in software development, mostly using web technologies. I've graduated the Faculty of Cybernetic Statistics and Informatic Economics. In 2015, I co-founded Developers with my partner, Cristina Pană, with the mission to help software teams feel empowered and experience innovation. We provide personalized learning programs in agile methodologies, consultancy, and research projects. So, as I mentioned, I'm very happy to figure out ways on how to improve the team experience with AI and machine learning. My interest started back in 2016 when I was coaching a team and we had to deal with a pretty complex project. And it was the first time I figured out that doing data science projects and doing machine learning needs a totally different approach than traditional software development. And this sparked curiosity to start my own pet projects. I'm now using AI to improve mobile user experience with Ruxibot, bot I'm designing, and also learning about arts by using neural style transfer learning.
And as far as I remember, you started that project, Ruxibot, it's a hackathon, right?
Yes, we started it at the hackathon you are organizing together with the team at Bucharest.js. So yes. This is how I continued my research. So for this webinar, we already defined like a scenario when for companies that already own some data, so they have some in-house engineers, they already do software development. They use some of the agile practices like Scrum or planning in an empirical environment. And they want to introduce artificial intelligence and machine learning processes within their teams. Yeah. And probably they're looking into MorphL as a candidate for their set of tools. So having this in mind, we also try to structure a bit the conversation about around some concerns that arise when you have to deal with a new and emerging technology. So first of all, we figure out that in artificial intelligence, it's harder to make formal requirements. So you can have a very simple requirement. So for example, we want human level performance to detect kittens in pictures. But how do you specifically describe this requirement is very different than in a traditional software project where you can draw some mock-ups, you can describe the user experience, or you can create some kind of wireframes for the UI. In AI, you have to deal with data and you have to deal with some KPIs that you have to accomplish for determining if your model is pretty performant. Then we figure out that AI and machine learning is focused more on experiment rather than deliverables. You have to iterate a lot to obtain better results. And another question is, who is the user? Is the user the actual person that is interacting with the product, or is the user the development team that integrates the model? So these are some concerns that we highlighted to start our conversation on how to tailor Scrum for creating an efficient AI machine learning team. The reason we chose Scrum was that Scrum already performs well in complex environments. And what I understand by complex environments, it's an environment where both the technology is emerging. So you don't know all the possible solutions. You don't have a solution that you can apply every time to obtain the same result. You have to constantly be learning and improving your process. It's not human possibly to know all the machine learning frameworks or to know all the techniques, and you have to keep improving your product. So this is one dimension that drives the complexity. The second dimension is requirements that are changing as the business evolves. So you won't be able to do one set of requirements, tick them, and in the end consider the project done. Well, in this setup, you need a way to rapidly iterate, to test, and to gather real data from your users to see if the models are actually performing good. So next, I'm trying to imagine a bit the workflow for a typical data-driven project. So we would start from a data set that you need to construct. You need to have different roles involved, like data engineers, data analysts, data scientists that are creating models. So we already see that it's not something that one person can do by themselves. So you need to integrate different people. So we talk about a team, not only individuals that work on specific tasks.
And
Next.
this is something that I can also confirm. I mean, whenever we start with the data, with the raw data, we have around the table the subject matter expert. We also have the data scientist and machine learning
Mhm,
engineer, and our goal is to actually have a proof of concept, a first iteration of a model as soon as possible, and we limit that to 1 month. And in 1 month, we actually have maximum, probably two maximum sprints.
mhm, mhm.
And
So
we actually,
I see that you already figure out some kind of time boxing
Mhm.
certain steps in the overall process,
Mhm.
with data being the most important asset, and bringing people that can contribute to describing that model.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah.
how about the next step? I assume having a model is not sufficient and is not the output that you are desiring. You're trying to actually use that model into production. So you have to go further on the pipeline once the proof of concept has been validated, and
Exactly. Yeah.
do the actual integration with, let's say, the e-commerce platform that the client is using. Uh,
Exactly.
how
Yeah.
how is this process going for you?
So after we have the proof of concept in the first month, then and we're satisfied with the accuracy, and we're measuring that week by week. That's our main goal during the proof of concept stage. Once we get to a decent model, then we involve the software engineers and big data engineers to build, in our case, the three pipelines. So we have the ingestion, data ingestion pipeline, training pipeline, and then prediction pipeline. And
Mm-hmm.
this actually takes a little bit more time. It depends on the complexity of the project. It can be 3 months, it can be 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
And then with those pipelines in place, we're able to go into production with at least a pilot, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the pilot for us is defined like having giving access or integrating that model with
Mm-hmm.
all of its pipeline into the ecosystem, the digital product that we're trying to introduce, the AI ML, but not for 100% of their users.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe doing A/B testing for 50-50% or something like that. So that's the
Mm-hmm.
pilot. And then we have that pilot for, let's say, 1 month, or again depends on the traffic and the volume of data. And then we analyze that with our stakeholders, with our clients, and then we decide to move to full production if everything goes well. Otherwise, we get back to the drawing board and we evaluate and improve whatever needs to be improved.
So you perfectly describe what an iterative process is.
Yay!
And I imagine that this pipeline phase is probably more familiar for and more more aligned with traditional software development,
It
because
is.
you
Yep.
have to do APIs, you have to design interfaces, maybe do front end changes to a custom new features. So
Yep.
again, what AI and machine learning actually brings here is a new set of mental models and a new language that all the team has to acquire. For example, even a front end developer that previously was focusing on the user experience now has to understand a bit how a model works, what kind of outputs can it bring, so that he can use those APIs. And then moving into production, probably it takes a lot of orchestrating releases and orchestrating the infrastructure to incorporate all this model. We also have this evaluation period because we need to admit that one model cannot be perfect, and actually the condition are changing, maybe the user behaviors are changing, and you have to keep reiterating on the model. How do you go about that? Is
Yeah.
something you let the client do there, or you are also supporting them? Are they part of
Yeah.
the client is part of these sprints, these iterations?
We encourage our clients to be part of the entire development process, starting from the model to production and evaluation. Just because usually, let's say, non-AI ML engineers or people that don't have necessarily that kind of information or knowledge skills, they regard as artificial intelligence and machine learning as black boxes. And this is our way, even with the open source, but mostly through encouraging our clients to get involved into the process, the development process. We encourage them to see that AI and ML is approachable, how we approach that, the fact that they can actually contribute by being subject matter experts by knowing their business, because at the end of the day we're starting from a business outcome, and then we define whatever needs to be done at the technical level. So by getting them involved, they feel that this is also something that they can contribute and control. And on the last stage, the evaluate, Obviously, when you introduce, if we're dealing with user behaviors, if you're introducing a model that is predicting that user behavior, well, the reaction is that the user behavior is going to change. So
Obviously.
there's a feedback loop over there that needs to be included in and fed back to the machine learning model. And there are just by adding, and this is something that we're also talking with various customers, just by adding a ML model into your digital product, whether that's a publication, online publication, or an e-commerce, doesn't mean that your conversions will go up
Hmm.
or be increased by, I don't know, 10x.
Hmm.
No, that's something that your marketing department has to work with to
Hmm.
complement your to actually introduce and use the ML as an extra agent, if you will. It's not
Hmm.
going to do the marketing job for you. It will complement it. So that's where the creativity comes into place as well.
Hmm. Great. And I also assume that actual users are also learning about this new technology and start to change their attitudes towards uh, how they are, how they perceive useful these kind of models and the recommendation that the models would be. Uh, so I think now the actually challenge as we laid out this four-step process is, are we able to optimize the whole process in a sprint that is no longer than a month? How can we bring on the table people with very diverse skills so that we can execute all these four steps as a steady process and a lean process, and this would force us to think outside the expert model where we have one person that is the AI machine learning guy or girl that has all the knowledge and everybody around him is trying to figure out how to draw that seven lines, and to get into a mindset of forming teams. So this is uh, a topic that is very debated. What kind of team are we forming? Are we forming a project team, or are we forming a product team? And here I find some differences that may help your clients decide better on what they are trying to achieve. So when I'm thinking in terms of project teams, I see a team that is very short-lived. They are focused on a specific output. For example, we just form a team to obtain a label data set. We have that clear output, the database with labels that we want to predict. We would require some specialized skills that need to perform the work. We would probably have some kind of waterfall with some stages that we can define, so we can do quality control on each stage. And we usually start with a proof of work to validate as soon as possible that we are able to deliver that set of outputs, and that set of output is the quality that we are expecting. So I think the limitation of the project team, it's both in the scope, because you're just delivering some output, and in in the specialization that you have in the team. On the other hand, on the product teams, tend to be long lived. So when you plan forming a product team, you plan it for several years, and you want to grow that team. You want to develop the competences, let them experiment, work together, bound. Also, a product team is mostly focused on a business outcome. For example, increasing conversion rate or improving customer satisfaction. And in a product team, you would require cross-functional skills. So as you gave some examples, you would have people from the marketing that are interacting with the data engineers or data scientists that are creating models. And the users are both the marketing people, but they are also creators within that team. So they contribute to improve the product. In this context, you would have a process that is both iterative and incremental. So you want to deliver new product version based on the value they add to the business. You usually start with a minimum viable product or the proof of concept that you mentioned, and test it as soon as possible with real users. So once you have decided between forming a project team or product team, you can go further and uh, do some tailoring on the methodology. And we will look into several dimensions here on how we can tailor Scrum for AI and machine learning teams.
Okay, so this looks interesting to me because obviously whenever we start to work with a customer, with a client, we have in mind building a product and a minimum viable product for them, which mainly involves one or more machine learning models that needs to go through those three pipelines that I previously described, and then obviously those machine learning models needs to be integrated within their product. However, the first stage where we talked about the data and the proof of concept, to me usually seems more like a project, because it's just 1 month. It does not involve a lot of people into building that proof of concept of a model. It mainly is the machine learning engineer, the subject matter expert, and the data scientist. And only after that, we involve the software engineers, the big data engineers, to integrate that into the pipeline. So for the overall product, yes, I can see the right column being valid, but for specifically just for the proof of concept for the very first phase, I actually see that the project team is more aligned with what we're doing for that phase. I don't know if that's something that is
I think
in your mind.
I think this makes totally sense because as you have something that you can, in a way, repeat and learn from a different project, when you get into a new client, you already have some experience. So building that proof of concept and having that proof of work is also a validation for them that you can actually deliver, and it's also a validation that they can actually deliver the data you need, deliver uh, the feedback you require. So I'm seeing this especially in when you have a collaboration between a client and a vendor. But as the relationship evolves, we tend to go in the right side. We tend to form product teams and to have all the people on board to deliver end-to-end
Yep, exactly. That makes perfect sense.
functionality.
Yep. True that.
Okay, now we're getting a bit in the part where we're trying to figure out how we can tailor Scrum. I'll try to do just a brief introduction because we already assume that most of the people interested in this topic already have some sort of development team and they already do some of the agile practices. So the core of the Scrum framework is the Scrum team that is formed by three roles: the product owner, the development team, and the Scrum Master. And Scrum aims to deliver product increments in very short iteration. Uh, and they do this in a time box that's no longer than 1 month. So when dealing with how should we adjust Scrum, we tend to have some question around this topic. So how long the sprint should be, who are the good candidates for the role of the product owner and scrum master, how should we deal with the product backlog, and what we consider a done product in the increment at the end of the sprint. And Ciprian, I'm also inviting you here to the conversation as we try to figure out some of the question, and maybe you have more question. So I'm starting with the first one. How long should the sprints be? So the only thing that the Scrum Guide mentions is that we have to aim for a sprint that is no longer than 1 month. Typically, I see teams choosing the option from the middle. They do 2-week sprints where they plan to do a new version of the product. So how is this for you? How are you finding these sprints in your
Yeah.
machine learning work?
So it is typically 2-4 weeks for a proof of concept. And in a typical sprint, the data scientist or the machine learning engineer can access the raw data from a new or existing data source, perform future ideation and engineering, and then retrain and test the machine learning model before integrating into those pipelines. And our main goal during these, let's say, 2-4 weeks is the improvement in accuracy relative to the previous sprints. That's the main thing that we're measuring. And after 4 weeks, we decide whether we should continue with that proof of concept. If it has been validated as a proof of concept and then can be integrated into the pipelines.
Yes,
So
because
4 weeks, yeah.
I think here a more appropriate question is how long the feedback loop should be, because of a sprint always ends with the review and the retrospective that gives the opportunity for the teams to reflect and adapt their process. So if you have a short feedback loop, let's say a one week sprint, this will give you the opportunity to adapt more quickly. If you have to deal with a lot of uncertainty, if people don't know much about the process, you would like to have shorter prints so that you have time to learn and improve for the next sprint.
Yeah. And actually, this is something that I can also ask you, since we're building multiple machine learning models for different customers and use cases. Would it be okay to have, for example, to vary the sprint time? For example, for machine learning models that we already know and have experience with, for a proof of concept, we can have sprints of 2 weeks or something like that. And for those that are more complicated, more complex, have 1 week sprints.
Mm-hmm. I think there's a bit of debate here. Some people in the Scrum community advocate for keeping a constant pace, so that you get, and it's more a team dynamic problem. If you have a constant length of the sprint, people in the team will get used with those ceremonies. They will know that you will do the sprint planning exactly on Monday every 2 weeks. So it's not necessarily a technological problem. It's a more people problem to get with a pace and to get everybody accustomed with the ceremonies, the sprint planning, the dailies, the reviews, and the retrospectives. On the other hand, the conclusion of the sprint is a potential releasable product, but this doesn't mean necessarily that you have to delay your releases or delay the testing at the end of the sprint. You could do multiple releases within that sprint. So for example, if you do a 1 month sprint and you have to build 3 models, you can already release one of the models to be tested with, let's say, 50% or 30% of the users. And then during the review and during the conclusion of the sprint, you can see how the model actually performed and consider the performance of the model the actual result of the sprint, not only the model itself. So, and I also think for certain contexts, you can decide on varying the sprint length. So, for example, do a 1 month sprint for something that is very new and you haven't done it before, and then reduce it to a shorter cycle as you go into uh, a more granular, refined improving of the product.
Yeah, it's funny because that's something that we did without actually knowing the being educated into the methodology, but that's organically that's what we felt. We
Hmm.
started with 1 month, and then okay, we need to refine this as quickly as possible, and then
Hmm.
we reduce the sprint's length.
The principle I'm promoting the most is to keep the time box. So if you have decided on a time box, stick to the time box and use it as a way to make future prediction regarding how you can deliver in future sprints. So
Yep,
this would
makes
be an
sense.
argument for keeping the same duration
Okay.
of the sprint, because you can do easier prediction on how you can deliver. Because clients would ask, how many sprints do you need for this?
Yeah.
Where can we go to production? But I'm also trying to be flexible enough to let teams adjust the length.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes sense.
Okay, maybe we can go to the next topic. So, who should be the product owner and who should be the scrum master, or do we need these roles? Does it make sense to be two persons in the team, or one person could play the both roles? Um, Now, in terms of product ownership, the main concern of the product ownership is to maximize the value produced by the team. So we should have someone that is either an expert in the business area that the product is using, the or someone that is empowered to make decision by the stakeholder or the business owner. So I think this is the the role with the that has the most pressure, because is on the one part is the business is asking him or her for results, and the team are asking him for clear requirements, feedback, and it's a person that should be very adaptable, should be very aware about the capabilities and the resources that the team has. So most of the time I see product owners that come from the client and they are directly involved with the team that is developing the product, or I also see some sort of proxy product owners that come from the vendor and help the team or the client team to understand the new product. So I think in the context of AI and machine learning, a product owner is someone that also has the technical skills and it's able to be an advocate for these new technologies and to prove their use cases and their value.
And
Yeah.
I can definitely confirm. I mean, we are a small team, and for most of our projects and products or machine learning models, I'm the product owner because I also talk with customers and clients, and I know the business side. But I also have a technical background, so it makes me kind of the perfect fit for now to be the product owner. But I imagine a future where the product owner can be with a client for bigger enterprise accounts.
Great. Now about the Scrum Master role. The Scrum Master is the person that leads the process. But we have to define now what the process means. If we only look at the process, the Scrum process, maybe you can employ someone that is already familiar with how to help teams use Scrum. But from time to time, I see the Scrum Master role also as a person that has experience in the actual development of the product and is able to help other people, not with solving the problems, but with coaching them in their area of expertise. Or it's a person who has to understand each role within the team and promote collaboration and removing impediments that might emerge during the development.
Can I ask something here?
Yes, sure.
Do you think a CTO is rather fit in the product owner role or Scrum Master, or neither?
I think having the CTO role already gives you some sort of management position, and you drive some kind of decision within the whole company, like how we use technologies overall in the company. But if it's a really small team, actually a one team product, usually you end up with the CTO being also the Scrum Master, because he knows the technologies in very detail, and he's trying to empower other team members to deliver results. So if the CTO is willing to let the people in the team make decisions, because the Scrum Master role is not a person that makes decisions in the name of the team, is the person that encourages team members to take their own decisions. If the CTO is not very attached to his or her decisions, I think it would be a very good candidate. If the CTO still drives important technical decisions, I think it would make more sense to promote someone from the team as a Scrum Master, or let this role to be taken by somebody else. Does this make sense?
Yeah, makes sense. I was actually thinking when you were explaining that the CTO not being involved in the product or taking decision. Honestly, I have yet to meet that kind of CTO, because yeah, especially when CTOs are also the founders of the company, then they are really attached to their baby, which is the product and the code, the technical part. So yeah.
Yes. But as the team scales is when you actually feel the need of these roles to be more
Absolutely.
to be better defined. And
Yeah.
I would say look at the Scrum Master as a facilitator. So someone that is very willingly to support other people to perform at their best in any moment of the product.
That's interesting, because this leads me to another question. So maybe like a transition phase from maybe a small company to a medium-sized company. You have like a external, I don't know, Scrum Master, somebody that can come inside as a consultant or something like that, that knows the methodology and can act as a Scrum Master within the team until somebody is trained to actually take that role. Does that make sense?
Yes, and this is actually what we are doing at developers. We are providing, if you want, the Scrum Master as a service platform. So we go into teams, help them with the process, and then someone from the team will take the full role. And from here, there are a lot of questions whether the Scrum Master is a full-time role or a part-time role. But I don't think this is very specific to machine learning or AI projects. These are questions that are very general and can apply to any sorts of software development projects. But if I'm coming back to these roles, I think both of them need to contribute to one thing that I find it very important for the whole Scrum team and the clients. That is to create that set of common language and common mental models for the team to operate within these new concepts that emerge from using AI and machine learning. So they need to have some kind of expertise and to foster that collaboration between the actual people that create the models. Okay, another question that we have prepared is how do we deal with the product backlog? As we mentioned in the introduction, we figure out that is for AI and machine learning is pretty hard to do upfront requirements. You cannot sketch or do a mock-up of how a product would look like. And probably having being very hard to define who the user is also very hard to write user stories for the product backlog. So how should we deal with this product backlog? Well, I would say to be very pragmatic about the product backlog and use it how is defined in the original Scrum guide. The product backlog should be a list of items and should enable rapid prioritization based on the business value that is delivered by that improvement that you are considering. And I would also advise to think in two features of each product backlog item. One feature would be complexity, how hard is to develop that item, and how much effort does it take, how many people are involved. And another dimension would be business value. And obviously, on this model, you would aim to deliver the items that provide the most business value. That would be the low hanging fruits. Then for the items that don't provide enough business value, teach them. And the ones that are both complex and but also provide value, try to restructure them so that you can reduce complexity, either by doing experiments or on certain data sets and understand how bigger data sets can become more useful, or by doing experiments on small batches of users and then gradually roll out. So the product owner should be the one that is refining and should see this product backlog as a constant document that is evolving. What I think the product backlog should always reflect the learning of the team. So everybody should be encouraged to contribute there and to refine those items. And as the team evolves, you will become better on maybe formalizing and provide some kind of templates or understand how these items can be tailored for machine learning projects. Okay, one final question that I'm trying to address is what do we consider a done product increment at the end of the sprint? And as we see in the first part, we can have multiple stages We have the building the model, building the pipeline, actually delivering in production, and evaluating uh, the model with real user. So crafting a good definition of done will help both the team members and the client set the right expectation. So we I think the answer for this question is that we can go gradually. At first, we could start by defining done as having the model that can be tested and can be validated with real data or the samples that we used for testing. And I would also introduce the in the definition of done the performance criteria for the specific model. So we would have some sense of the model performance and understand if it's something that we are confident enough to go in production with. Other elements of the definition of done might include some quality checklists, like do some documentation for the code that was written, or the model or the code should be reviewed by another team member. So there are a lot of sources of inspiration from the software development process that can be adapted to obtain the perfect definition of done. Also, I would try, as the team matures, to evolve the done to include all the steps. So I would suggest to try to do within a sprint all that steps that you have identified, like gather new data, create the model, create the pipeline, test it in production, and then in the next sprint fine tune and improve uh, the product. So this would be the ideal. If this is not feasible, probably we would end up with several sprints that have some intermediary results. Uh, but I think the end goal should be to try to integrate all the roles, all the capacity, and all the processes within one sprint, so that you have an end-to-end product that can be tested. Um, Probably this is the biggest challenge now, to align the client teams, the machine learning teams to actually deliver a final version of the product in one sprint.
Yeah, and I think definition is done from a technical point of view or product point of view makes sense. However, I would ask this: would you include in the definition of done what the client is actually measuring? So, for example, we're providing a shopping stage prediction model. The
Hmm.
end goal of that model is to actually increase their conversions. From
Hmm.
their point of view, they might not care if the model, technically speaking, is done, if
Hmm.
it's integrated into the pipeline, and if it's integrated within their e-commerce digital product.
Hmm.
From their point of view, it's done if it increases their bottom line.
Hmm. Hmm. I think this kind of relationship matures as the team evolves together, and teams no longer try to deliver only a product increment, but what I'm observing, they are starting to formulate goals at the beginning of the sprint that would extend the scope of the sprint to touch on these business outcomes that you are describing. And I think this question actually completes the suggestion I was making in the beginning of the presentation, whether you have to choose between a project team or a product team. as you evolve, you go more on the product side. So obviously you start setting goals that would reflect the business outcomes and that would influence business metrics like increase revenue or improve conversion rate. So I think this is where an ideal mature team would operate in.
Makes perfect sense.
And I think this should be the outcome that you would desire while trying to tailor Scrum. So I don't think I have a concrete answer on how to do it, but if you are doing proper retrospectives and at the end of every sprint you review how you can improve your collaboration, how you can create a more performant environment, you will end up on not only focusing on a done product increment, but focusing on that specific product increment solving the business issues that you're trying to achieve.
Yep, makes perfect sense. All right, cool. Well, this was tailoring Scrum for AI ML teams in a nutshell. Edward, it was a pleasure. Thank you for your insightful presentation.
Thank you for the conversation, and thank you for the opportunity to contribute. And I'm very happy to see this initiative grow and this community that you're creating with MorphL fostering.
Appreciate it, man. This is where you can find me and Edward. Thank you all for watching, and be sure to follow this webinar series. We're going to post a new webinar every month. The next one is scheduled for the beginning of October. So stay tuned for the next videos and make sure to subscribe or leave a comment if you have any questions. See you next time.